Well, after a couple of false starts, I think I'm ready to get this video going. Last time I did anything with bees was probably 1986. I learned yesterday that that's when the varroa mite invaded, was in 86, 87, and apparently came all the way across the country and gave beekeepers another headache to deal with. Apparently we also have small hive beetles now to tend with. So that's two things that I'm going to have to learn about dealing with that I'd never seen in a beehive before. So I guess everybody's going to learn a little bit along with me. Given the plight of bees these days, I figured it wouldn't hurt me to put out a couple of hives, maybe 3 or 4, to try and give them a boost. I have to edit that out. Anyway, went and picked up my nuke hive yesterday, which we'll get to in a little bit. But right now, I'm finishing up putting the comb in the deep box, or brood hive. People call it a lot of different things. I'm used to dealing with 10-frame hives and supers, but I've decided to use, at least on my first couple of hives, I'm going to go with 8-frame. There's a lot of proponents for both out there. Usually your big producers, commercial setups, they use 10 hives for the most part. The 8-frame has come about more popular because it's easier to manage. Bees tend to, at least on the small scale, like it a little bit better. It'll be interesting to see how they winter. Never had to deal with an 8-frame. Some people say there's not enough bees for that to make it through the winter. I believe I disagree with that, but I'll find out soon enough. It's kind of late in the season to start a hive, but it's still early enough to where I feel comfortable that they'll make it. I'm going to talk to the neighbor and see if they'll allow me to sow some buckwheat for them. We got some rain coming from Hurricane Dorian later next week, and hopefully that'll be enough to get that buckwheat started and give them something to work before real winter gets here. Earlier this week, I put together my deep frames, and I guess now I'll show you a little bit of detail on those. Alright, the deep frames, a little over 9 inches. I'm not getting too precise about it. The majority of the deep frames in the U.S. are all the same length. Did a little glue on each joint, a couple staples on the top. That's because my staples are a little smaller than what I'd like to add, but it's what I got. I also put in the wire eyelets on these. See if I can get you a good shot. These brass eyelets are in here so that when you're using wax starter comb, that it can provide support for the bees and the comb. Brood frames can get really heavy when they're full of honey or brood. And of course you got the slot here in this top. Now these frames came with, I guess, what you can consider a starter strip. If you don't want to use comb, you can put this in the top of the frame here. And that gives the bee something to attach to that will pretty much make the comb straight. I don't know anybody that does that. Most people use either natural comb, which is what I have in this frame, which I purchased. So this is a natural. I don't know if I'm going to add wires to this or not. I'll debate that later. And then what I'm using on these is the black acorn plasticell. Now, one thing I did do on the plasticell that's kind of an option, some of these plasticell starters have what they call bee tunnel tabs. And basically, it's a little tab that you break off the corner to give the bees a place to travel between frames without having to go all the way around and down. You know, think of it as a bee expressway. Some of these plasticells will have corner tabs that you can break off on both corners. This particular, I believe this is an Acorn brand. They only have the tabs on one corner, and I've broken those all off to facilitate the bees. Hopefully they'll appreciate it, but somehow I don't think that's their priority. So anyway, today I'm putting the plasticell in the deep frames to get my hive out to the bench so I can move my nuke over into the main body, which I'm also working on putting together today. The weather is absolutely fantastic. Nice and sunny and not too hot. This is the 8-frame hive, called a brood box or a deep frame, normally used for the queen and all her sister minions. Some beekeepers will use 2 of these deep frames for brood boxes and then add the supers. I think I'm going to go with the traditional way that I learned it, and I'm only going to have the one deep frame brood box, and then I'm going to use supers on top of that. But I won't need my supers until next year when the flow starts and the bees have room to expand. What these guys have got to work on is getting their reserves built up so that they can make it through the winter. Typically here in Central Virginia, I'm about an hour west of Richmond, the winters tend to be short-lived and intense, so we get maybe 1 or 2 snows a year, and temperatures rarely go below, 35. But sometimes we get hit pretty hard. It just, depends on good old Mother Nature. A few of the tools I'm using today. I'm going to get into those. First thing, the one tool you never go anywhere without is your pocket knife. And of course, every mechanic knows what this is. That's called a fine alignment tool. And then, of course, every redneck's dream tool is good old vice grips. They're almost as important as duct tape, which, by the way, I will not be using today. No duct tape allowed in beekeeping. And of course, got a little air stapler to put the frames together. It's so much easier than kind of nail these frames together. My thumb thanks me every time I do this. So I'm going to try to get this on a tripod and record putting these frames together. Alright, Cecil B. DeMille I'm not, so camera quality or footage quality might be a little lacking, but hopefully we can get the important parts done. Now that I've got most of the frame put together and we're starting on the bottom rail, there's a groove in both the top frame and the bottom frame. Some of these will have this slot all the way through. My frames do not. And because I'm using the plasticell, I don't have to worry about wiring the frames. But I think I will do one wiring just to show how that's done. I always like to use a bit of wood glue to begin with. Nails are great, staples are great. Wood glue, it's just one of those things that makes stuff stay together. I'm using my B-tunnel tabs on the bottom. Haven't had any experience with it in any other position, so just going to go with what I know. We do it's real easy getting these on here. Sometimes you can have a bit of a stubborn one that doesn't want to go together, even though everything's lined up. And that's why we have the fine alignment tool. Make sure you get the top, or in this case the bottom. Make sure you get that on all the way. There are tolerances in the hive. There's room for things to move around, so it's not rocket science. You don't have to be down to the last flea hair getting these put on. Like I said, I like using the air gun. It just makes your life easier. Hopefully all this is in frame. And I got off a little bit on that one, so we'll give it 2 for good measure. And then it goes in the box. Now, I was talking earlier about putting wires in these frames, which is, like I said, a traditional way of doing it. Before modern man came out with plastic for everything. And in this case, I can't get away from using the hammer. That's a necessary evil of putting the wires in the frame. There are several different methods to doing this. Frankly, I've never done this before, so it'll be a learning experience for a little bit of everybody. Of course, you know, you can go on YouTube and find a lot of people that have done this for the viewing audiences. Like I said, I'm new at this particular part of it. But I'm going to start at the bottom and work our way up. Like I said, hopefully I'm getting all this on video. It's essential that you not kink the wire. And unlike, I guess some people might say the good old days, nowadays we have stainless wire. Now granted, stainless wire is not the cheapest thing out there, but it's really the best thing to use. Anything else. Brass wire used to be a thing, but it does eventually corrode. Good old stainless is there for what you need it for. Probably hearing the wife's wind chimes in the background there. She got those hung up the other day after being silent for the better part of 2 years while we were waiting on the house to get rebuilt. We seem to have a nice breeze around here. It keeps those things running quite a bit. Do a little adjustment here. I think I might be off a little bit. Anyway, you got your stainless nails. Again, stainless is a great, I won't say invention, but it's quite the thing when it comes to keeping contamination out of your hive. A couple of wraps around the nail. In this case, I'm going to put the nail right into the frame. Give us a little more holding together power, if you will. Clip off the little bit of excess we got here. And then we're going to manually take up as much of the slack as we can. I'm going to show you how to tension it here in just a second. And that's approximately what we want. I'm going to put this guy off here. And of course the spool goes apeshit. Sorry about the language. Let's get this wrapped back up, as I will not be using this anymore. And this is where the old pipe clamp comes into play. Of course, it would help if I remember where I put my pipe clamp. First, you got to be careful not to grab your wire when you're doing this. Not exactly the easiest thing to do. We'll start our nail over here on the base or the side. I'm going to drive that down about half or 2/3. Get out our trusty vice grips and clamp on. Now we'll go back, and you kind of have to tension this in both directions. Kind of like tuning a banjo or a guitar, and you will hear it tighten up. I mean, you can't really play music with it, but without those brass eyelets, it would rip right through the soft frame wood. Most of these, in fact I think mine, are made with pine. Come up, wrap around your end nail, drive it home, and trim it off. And now you can install your comb. May have done that a bit backwards because probably a good idea to put your comb in first. Because now I can't take the base off and remove it, but natural wax is quite flexible, especially like today if you leave it sitting in the sun for just a few minutes. It becomes really pliable and you can put it literally anywhere you want. So it's not necessary to put it in first, but if you're doing this in cold weather, it'd probably be a good idea. And now we'll take our trusty clamp off. And as you heard, I don't know if you can, camera's picking that up, but you can play a tune on this if you wanted to. And that's how you wire your brood frames. I'm going to set this one aside, as I'm not going to need it right now because, as I said, I've got a 5-frame nuke out there waiting to go into this box. So I'm only going to need 5 frames of starter cell But this will get used on the next box, which hopefully I'll be putting out come April. I'm not going to risk 2 hives over the winter. If I'm going to lose, I'd rather only lose the one. But for now, that's I'm going to go ahead and do all these frames with the plasticell just so I'll have them on hand and won't have to do this when I get my next nuke.